Resistance is a symbol of honesty and integrity. It is having a voice when no one is willing to hear. It is standing up for a cause even when timing is against all odds. When I think of resistance, two honorable men come to mind. An influential, educated former African American slave, Frederick Douglass, and the other, an Anglo-Saxon middle-class writer, Henry David Thoreau. Although from different societal backgrounds, Frederick Douglass and Henry David Thoreau collectively shared the same vision for government reform, strongly criticizing the United States government as being oppressive and immoral. They were both slavery abolitionists, and their writings reflect a style of resistance. Their actions were inspired by the individualistic ideology. Thoreau and Douglass had strong views on religion, slavery, and government laws, and the correlation that existed among the three. In What to the Slave is the 4th of July, Frederick Douglass addresses the falsehood of Christianity, claiming it is the primary source for many of the unjust laws passed within government. Douglass states, "You boast about your love of liberty, your superior civilization, your pure Christianity, while the political power of the nation is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 millions of your countrymen." He explains, the tyrants were deceiving the masses while hiding behind the face of religion. Willing to denounce his own religious beliefs, Frederick Douglass chants, "For my part, I would say, welcome infidelity, welcome atheism, welcome anything in preference to the gospel as preached by those divines. They preach the Bible in one hand and carry the slave whip on the other." As an activist in the Union for the anti-slavery movement, Frederick Douglass became the first African American to have political influence. During the Civil War, he became an advisor to former President Abraham Lincoln, suggesting the Emancipation Proclamation. Henry David Thoreau's faith and ideology was placed on inner self-value and spirituality. This led to his adoption of individualism, which was a component of transcendentalism. Transcendentalism focuses on the inner self and higher learning. Individualism advocates independence and morality as common virtue. While being incarcerated for refusing to pay poll tax, Thoreau viewed his situation as honorable because he opposed what was decided upon the majority as unfair. According to Thoreau, the sole act of voting is deceptive, comparing it to a game of checkers. The people are being misrepresented, and the voice of the real majority remains invisible. In Civil Disobedience, he quotes, "If it is of such a nature that it requires you to be the agent of injustice to another, then I say, break the law. Let your life be a counter friction to stop the machine." He sacrifices physical freedom for internal freedom. He believed sitting in a prison cell for resisting to follow the status quo was an act of courage and integrity. He opposed the corrupt society which promoted unnecessary wars, overtaxed its people who were already underpaid, and exploited African Americans by enslaving them. Similarly to Douglass, Thoreau was defiant of the Fugitive Slave Act, being that he helped the slaves escape to Canada during the Civil War. In Civil Disobedience, Thoreau shows his disdain for slavery laws by stating, "I cannot for an instant recognize that political organization as my government, which is a slave's government also." Civil disobedience has 4 essential components: collection of facts to determine whether injustice exists, negotiation, self-purification, and direct action. Civil disobedience was the appropriate method to start a movement amongst a group of people who continued to be oppressed. Thoreau states, "Government is best which governs least." The government was too deeply involved in its own personal interests and neglected the civil rights of the American people. In Civil Disobedience, Thoreau states, "It does not keep its country free. It does not settle the West. It does not educate. The American government waged the Mexican War without a cause. Slavery continued, and people living in poverty were still uneducated." Frederick Douglass states, "The right to hold and to hunt slaves is part of the Constitution framed by our illustrious fathers of this republic. Slaves who attempted to escape to the North were to be sent back to the South until they could someday purchase their freedom. The Declaration of Independence and 4th of July promoted everything but liberty. especially for those who lacked political power and wealth. The only remedy to these injustices seemed to be civil disobedience. Henry David Thoreau's civil disobedience inspired Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s plan of action, allowing for peaceful, nonviolent marches and substantive thinking. Like Frederick Douglass, he addressed the hypocrisy of Christianity, unveiling the neglect amongst stagnant preachers who refused to stand up for their fellow African American Christians. Similarly, in What to the Slave is the 4th of July, Frederick Douglass quotes, "These ministers make religion a cold and flinty-hearted thing, having neither principles of right action or compassion." Frederick Douglass and Henry David Thoreau will remain as voices for the invisible for generations to come.